You have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV.
Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Welcome to TV Guidance Counselor. It's Ken Reed here, your TV Guidance Counselor, discussing classic premillennial television every week with a fascinating guest. Sometimes it's post-millennial. We do often, when I have a very young guest on, go post-2000. But anyway, that is a minor quibble. My guest this week is the incredible Guinevere Turner. Guinevere is a writer, actress, director. You probably best know her for having written American Psycho and The Notorious Betty Page, and the movie Go Fish, which she is also in. She is so smart, so funny, ridiculously accomplished. I cannot thank her enough for taking the time to talk to me. I had a hell of a time getting into her apartment, and it was very embarrassing. And yet she still spoke with me. So she is an absolute saint. Also, we discussed it a bit in this episode, but the group she grew up in was founded in Boston in 1968 and is detailed in friend and guest of the show, former guest of the show, Ryan Walsh's book, Astral Weeks, which you probably already have, especially if you listen to the second time Ryan was on, where we discussed 1968, but pick up that book. We discussed it a little bit here, and it was pretty fun to find out that Ryan was a mutual friend. So anyway, every week we talk about classic TV. If this is your first time checking out the show, welcome. If you're here because you're a fan of Guinevere's, you have excellent taste, and I think you will enjoy this discussion very, very much. If you would like to email me, you can do so at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com. You can also go on all the social media. We are at TV Guidance or TV Guidance Counselor on Facebook. You can just search for it, or you can go to ikenread.com, IKENREID, which is my website, and there are links to all of that stuff there, as well as to any of my stand-up comedy stuff. You can buy TV Guidance Counselor merchandise and all that. And if you have a smart speaker, simply tell it to listen to the TV Guidance Counselor podcast. Works for Google, works for Alexa. It's very, very easy. And, I tested it myself, and you cannot get a more easy way to listen to the show. It'll play the latest episode for you. So that's exciting. And thank you to all the people who give to our Patreon, patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor. We are ad free. I finance this myself because I am a one-man show, and it is my favorite thing I've ever done. And I do not expect anything else in return, but, people ask for it, and they give monthly to the Patreon, and I cannot thank you for that enough. Anyway, on to the episode. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Guinevere Turner.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Guinevere Turner, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, Ken. Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for allowing us into your home here in illustrious Hollywood on our final day here. We fly home tonight to East Coast hell. Speaking of which, you grew up, you were talking before, and former guest of the show, friend of the show, Ryan Walsh, wrote a book that ended up kind of being about your family.
My family. Yeah, I grew up in a family called the Lyman family, and they are, one of their compounds is in Boston, and that's where I was born.
Was it the first one or one of the first ones?
It was the first one, yeah.
So it started there.
It started there.
And you had said to me you have a story about television that I probably never heard before, because you weren't allowed and kind of weren't allowed to mix with it at all? Or?
We didn't watch television. There was no universe in which you'd walk into a room and turn on a TV.
Right.
That was not allowed. But the leader of the family, Mel Lyman, was a huge fan of movies.
Okay.
And he made a list called the Lord's List of 100 movies. And when those movies were on, we had to watch them.
Oh, weird.
And so I have a distinct memory of, waking up at 3 a.m, being woken up at 3 a.m. because James Mason was in Odd Man Out, and that was one of the movies that was on the list. And so sleepy kids watching this movie. And then there were some Sesame Street moments where they decided we could watch Sesame Street, so I did get to watch that. But it wasn't until I was 12 when we left that I was sort of had a more free relationship with TV, and my obsession was Dallas. Who Shot JR was on the cover of Time magazine, and I lived for that show.
I think people forget how enormous of a cultural thing Dallas was. Like it, I was talking the show about how we all have this shared experience, some of us not, but of these cultural events, because there's only 3 channels, and Dallas was the one that, it was Time Magazine. Everybody knew who shot JR, the phrase, like, your grandmother, like, everybody.
Yeah.
And there's nothing kind of that all-encompassing now that I can even think of.
Well, when's the last time any kind of thing about a TV show was on the cover of Time Magazine?
Maybe one of the early reality shows is all I can think of, like Survivor, maybe.
Right, maybe, yeah. When Survivor first came out, it was a cultural obsession moment, wasn't it?
But not for long. And weirdly, I worked at our local CBS affiliate when that was on, and so they did the tryouts for the the subsequent seasons at our building. They built like a obstacle course in the parking lot.
Wow.
And actually Elizabeth Hasselbeck, who was on The View later, came in and auditioned at that thing and got on, which was really weird. So yeah, that's probably the last one I can think of. But had you ever been to Texas? Like, I mean, Dallas was just probably a world that was so alien.
I can literally hear the theme song in my head. When you said that, I was just picturing that opening shot and how Dallas, like the opening shot of all the skyscrapers and how like it just seemed so glamorous and grand and Texan. Yeah. No, I had never been to Texas.
Yeah, it's so, like, even, growing in Boston, it was, that scene, it might as well be Mars, that show. Like, it's
right, and I don't, as an adult, I don't think of Dallas as a particularly fancy, glamorous city, but they sure did make it seem like that's where the cool kids were.
Although, to be fair, I don't think anyone leaves their house without full hair and makeup in Dallas.
Right, they do bring that Texan grandeur.
Yes, you would never leave your house without keeping your hair up. Did you feel like you had to catch up on stuff when you got out and had to start watching these?
It's interesting because, so I'm 50, I was born in 1968, so my generation of people endlessly reference the Brady Bunch. Yeah. And I've seen the Brady Bunch, retro as reruns, and sort of tried to sort of know it a little so that when people make Brady Bunch references, I can sort of nod and smile, even though it wasn't part of the fabric of my upbringing. Weirdly, actually, another show that sometimes we were allowed to watch was The Twilight Zone.
Oh, that's odd. I mean, I guess it's moral and it's sort of like an Aesop fable.
It was scary. Oh, I found it really scary as a kid. But if there was a show we were allowed to watch, we gathered around. But we had this thing we called the clicker, not a remote control, but a switch so that we would turn off the commercials. So one with the audio on commercials, and it was someone's job always to have the clicker because they didn't want commercials to go into our ears, and so but it was a kind of a high pressure job to get, you had to pay attention and get it right so you didn't hear a single sound of the commercial, but then get right back in when the show was back on.
You could see the visuals, just not the sound.
Yeah,
that's extra weird. That would make me pay attention more.
It was stressful. I remember when I was the one doing the clicker, I was always like, don't fuck it up.
You got deputized to be the clicker. Like, if anyone hears a second of this ad,
I'm fired.
Done. You'll never be the clicker person again. But yeah, that was the other thing I was going to ask you is you kind of were robbed of that cultural capital that we have as kids. That's kind of the only thing you can talk to other kids about.
Right, generationally. Yeah, it's interesting. And yet I can talk to a lot of people about a lot of like most people my age haven't seen the movies that I've seen, all the old movies. And I grew up just, most of the movies on the Lord's list were movies from the 40s and 50s. And so I grew up, with Bette Davis and Lauren Bacall and Katharine Hepburn and all of that. Those were my Jan and Marcia.
Right, your classic.
Yeah. Yes. So I did actually get a real film education and a real appreciation for movies that I probably wouldn't have otherwise.
Your Oh My Nose is darling.
Yes.
That kind of thing.
Yes.
Wow, what was the unifying theme for the movies on the list? Like, do you remember, like, vaguely what the criteria was? Because it sounds like just movies he liked.
It was just movies he liked. I mean, they were good movies. It was like To Have and Have Not, Odd Man Out, African Queen, The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, both of the James Dean movies. My sister's actually named after the actress in East of Eden.
Wow.
So they were, he had good taste.
Yeah, you're lucky that it wasn't just like, we're watching the Three Stooges.
And then sometimes we would be allowed to watch MASH.
Oh, strange.
They really liked MASH, but that was a fly by night. Like there was just a month or two, and then it went away. And I really liked MASH. I always had a crush on Alan Alda.
Yeah.
I had a crush on Alan Alda, and I had a crush on Kermit, which basically is like I'm gay.
I mean, they're not that dissimilar, the two of them.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, you got a frog, Alan Alda,
And and Alan Alda being the quintessential sensitive 70s guy.
Yeah, who weirdly grew up in the burlesque houses in Scully Square in Boston.
Really?
His dad was a burlesque, like, baggy pants comic. And
That's hilarious. I did not know.
Yeah, so he's got all these stories of just being, like, 9 years old and there's strippers and everything. And he's like, yeah, whatever. John Kennedy's here. It's like, perfect. So you at like 12, you get out. Were you interacting with other kids who were watching stuff and kind of like, did you have to kind of cover, or were they like...
Yeah, because I was a big weirdo anyway, because I had literally, this is a profound concept that people don't really think about, but I had never had an acquaintance in my whole life. Everyone I knew, I had always known.
Right.
And there were no new people. So acquaintanceship was a challenge to me. I was told maybe on the second day of school by a girl who felt sorry for me. I think she was like, "You can't just stare at people." I'm like, oh, where I come from, we make constant eye contact because we're weirdos.
Yeah.
And I found myself kind of faking my way through my knowledge of television because I probably tried to explain how I grew up a couple times and then realized it's not going to fly.
That's worse.
Don't tell them about playing the banjo. Like, just don't.
It explains the Kermit thing.
Yeah. And don't tell them about any of it because it's too weird. So we also, one of the things they did was at daylight savings, they refused to acknowledge it, and so we had world time and our time for half the year.
Okay.
And in TV Guide, which they did get, where
They'd have to, because you'd have to know
the movies.
Right.
Things would be circled, and movies would be circled, and an OT or WT would be next to them, depending on world time and our time. So the TV Guide, I read. We had it, and I read it, but I read it, like a script of a movie I'm never going to see.
Right. I mean, it's not totally the same, but like when I was a kid, I obviously couldn't watch everything. So I was an early reader, I think I was 3, and I would read it cover to cover, and it was like watching everything.
Right, or just knowing it.
To watch it, because there was a description, and I'm like, all right, it's kind of like I watched that because I read it. So I wonder if that was a little bit of what you got to do too. Do you remember reading the articles or anything, or were you just kind of...
Yeah, I read it all. We didn't get... I don't think we got any other magazines except for TV Guide, which is also weird.
Good ad for TV Guide. It was the single largest the largest print run of any publication at that time. It was like by far. It was the most published.
In fact,
magazine.
I think one of the adults wrote for TV Guide. His name was Dick Russell.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
And I think he was writing for TV Guide. Maybe that's why we always had it, because everyone was kind of proud that he was this legit dude in the real world.
He got comp copies.
Yeah, maybe.
We do the movies. So what made you want to enter the world of entertainment then and sort of writing?
I know, I guess that is weird.
It's an odd...
Because I have worked in TV and I intend to again. I think so. I studied fiction writing in college, and that's sort of where I thought I was going. And then at some point after college, while I flailed about and was happy I could type fast so I could have temp jobs, I thought people watch movies more than they read books.
Yeah.
And if I want to say something and get a lot of people paying attention, movies seems like the way to go. And then I made a movie. And it got a lot of attention. We were blown away by my first film, Go Fish. We were blown away by where it took us and how we didn't quite realize the magnitude of what we were doing in terms of how it was going to shape the rest of our lives, which is awesome.
I mean, if you did, it would have been much more difficult to make. I imagine if you had that pressure on. Almost the... I always joke that, and I usually say this specifically to comedy, but people, instead of being career ambitious, when they start out, really just need to be creatively ambitious to like a delusional level, because if you knew enough, you just wouldn't even try to do that, because that's crazy.
Right.
But then you end up making good stuff. So it's that kind of thing where if you had known it would get that kind of attention, you would have been like, oh man, we better, like, the pressure's on.
What's interesting about that movie, Go Fish, is that we were really making it for lesbians, for our own community.
Right.
And something about that kind of purity, for lack of a better term, made it universal.
Well, it was, I mean, not being a lesbian, I may be wrong, but it was the first movie that I remember that was made for lesbians.
Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't. There was Desert Hearts, and there was Personal Best, and there was a movie called Clara the Moon that had just come out. But those were all about the struggles of finding your lesbian identity.
That's the story.
Yeah, and ours was about just a bunch of friends.
Right.
So we were the
just
first.
happened to be-
Yeah,
right.
that's just. But really, we're just having our dumb lives and our dumb jobs and our relationship dramas and whatever. And that was. That very simple thing was weirdly revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, it also you hit too at that time when that sort of, for lack of a better term, like Gen X indie cinema was hitting that tone of film as well. Like regardless of, and it was a good one too. So
Yeah, we really
hit all fronts.
I think that a younger generation doesn't realize that the concept of independent film was not as vibrant in the 90s it was like a phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like, Robert Rodriguez was like, I made El Mariachi for $7,000.
Yeah.
Then it was a competition, like, who can make a movie for the least amount of money?
I sold blood.
Yeah, it's like, I sold my mom into slavery.
It's like I get a helicopter shot.
Yes. So yeah, we hit, regardless of the gayness of it, of just the indie, the DIY indie-ness of it, and it's black and white, and we shot it on film, and at the end of the day, we maybe made the whole thing for $80,000.
Wow.
As I like to tell young filmmakers, $30,000 of that was fixing the sound. Get the sound right the first time.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And probably another 20 was film stock.
Yeah.
Which you don't have to bother with now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the indie films before that were generally what will make money. So it was horror movies or exploitation movies.
Right.
And that was kind of the first time where you were like, oh, we don't need the bells and whistles of horror and exploitation movies. We can just make a good movie.
Yeah.
Which is interesting now because every single major studio film that comes out is basically a horror and exploitation movie with $100 million budget.
I remember when Go Fish was in theaters, I was dating a woman who worked for Spike Lee, and she said that he saw Go Fish and said, they totally bit my style from She's Gotta Have It.
Had you even seen She's Gotta Have It?
We had it.
Yeah.
We had it. We eventually did, but we had it when we made the movie. We were like, no, we were just kind of following similar paths.
Yeah.
Weirdly black and white dating movie, but other than that, they're very different.
Yeah, but also you're of similar age, and I think that some of that stuff's in the ether too. Like creative people tend to have hit similar paths, at the same time.
Like me and Quentin Tarantino,
right?
because
Exactly.
he's in the middle of shooting a movie about about Manson.
Which we saw shooting the other day.
That's a long ass shoot.
Yeah.
And everybody, my movie is called Charlie Says. I wrote it. Mary Herron directed it. It just premiered at the Venice Film Festival, and we did a round of press. And everybody's asking us about Quentin Tarantino's movie.
course,
We're like,
yeah.
we don't know. You can't get this. If we wanted to read the script, we couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Actually, I would love to read the script, but I've tried. I can't get it.
Yeah.
But it's, my soundbite is, if you put me and Quentin Tarantino and a rock in a room and said, Guinevere, Quentin, write a script about that rock, they would be very different scripts.
Of course. Yeah. We're very different people.
Yes, but there's like a billion Manson movies out. It's like weird how it, we didn't try to time this with the 50th anniversary of the murders at all. I started writing this in 2014. It takes a long time to make movies, but it feels like a lot of people are capitalizing on that. And it is sort of fascinating to me that people are even still interested in this story.
That's what I was going to say. It's like we're definitely in a, this sounds like a weird turn of phrase, but a golden age of murder in media, because it's, we have podcasts and TV shows, and there's a real, there's always been a fascination with true crime, but it's kind of at like a peak level right now.
Yeah, it does feel like that. And if you look at Netflix and the documentaries that are there, even mediocre to poor documentaries are there and getting watched about true crime. Yeah, we love true crime more than we used to. Right, and those Dirty John, that podcast, and Serial, and
murder, like there's a lot of it. And it was always, like, I always remember there was, like, Hunting Humans serial killer book you could get in the 80s, or, like, there was serial killer trading cards, but it was still very fringe. It was sort of, if someone knew who Betty Page was in 1991, they probably owned some sort of serial killer book.
Totally.
That was usually what it was.
Those are the alt things to be into.
Like weirdly went together in a weird way.
When I first met Mary Harron, the director of American Psycho, the notorious Betty Page, and now my new movie, Charlie Says, the first thing she said to me was like, "You look an awful lot like Betty Page." And I said, "Who's Betty Page?" Cut to her being like, "I think we could make a movie out of this book, American Psycho." Me, what's American Psycho? I've never heard of that. I'm like, where would I be without Mary Harron? Also, what do I do all day that I didn't know who Betty Page was or had never heard of the book American Psycho?
A lot of people didn't. I mean, it was still sort of like a weird, not even underground, but just it wasn't mainstream yet.
Yeah.
And all that stuff sort of became mainstream after the millennium. For whatever weird reason. I don't know if it's because of the internet or, people are just trying to mine decades of fringe culture because they had nothing else. So they're like, oh, there's this culture that exists. We should do it.
It's really interesting about American Psycho that it's 18 years later. It's so... people are so into, new generation is really into it. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is that we were talking about toxic masculinity, that sort of catchphrase, and everyone was like, this is a weird movie. But then like it sort of grew on everyone.
Yeah.
And it's that is we are sort of constantly fascinated by we went back recently because we got 2 mediocre and 1 really bad review in Venice after Charlie Says screened, and we were, you're just bummed even though your movie's good. We were just bummed. And I was like, Mary, I Googled our reviews from our screening of American Psycho at Sundance, which were also terrible, from the Hollywood Reporter. And we just joke, we just go, it's hard being ahead of your time.
It's true, yeah, in 10 years. But I mean, people forget with American Psycho, the book, like, that book got terrible reviews. Like, people
just got a lot of attention.
Yeah, just got a lot of attention. But they actually, pretty much every Bret Easton Ellis novel, everyone hated for whatever reason. Because, so it's almost, if you had gotten glowing good reviews, it would almost be like it was not an accurate adaptation, or something like that.
I mean, what's amazing to me about American Psycho is that women in the last decade, women have said to me, women I know and have known said, I finally watched American Psycho, and it's actually a really good movie, and it's a feminist movie. To which I always say, so up till now, you've thought I was a sellout, exploitive misogynist, and you just saw the movie. I'm like, this is how you've felt about me for the last 15 years?
And I decided, I should see if she's a terrible person or not, and finally call up this movie. It was just such a pain to go down to Blockbuster. And now that I could just stream it, I thought, maybe I'll see if she's a good person.
And like, just how bad is she?
Yeah. But you really said, like, there's definitely a sort of through line for a lot of the stuff that you've been writing since then, along those lines. And it's not horror, but it is sort of the sort of study of dangerous broken personalities, sort of. Yeah. Or like, magnetic people who do bad things.
Yeah. And in the case of Charlie Says, the project of that movie is really, it's told from the perspective of the women, and half of it takes place in prison, where them in prison, which is something that no one ever talks about.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of reframing the monster, the myth of Charles Manson into just a kind of a shitty, manipulative, bad guy.
Yeah, a little
losery, wannabe, failed artist who's just really good at manipulating people.
And the women are the ones who actually did the murder.
Yeah, he didn't kill anybody.
No, he killed nobody. It's very weird. I since I started doing this show, I get asked to do a lot of Q&As, moderate things at conventions and stuff, and horror conventions. And the last one I did, which was in the Midwest, in not a great area, which may be why this was, but there was more of people who were wearing like Richard Ramirez shirts and, obsessing over Charles Manson. And it just really made me angry.
Like, it's not a campy, kitschy thing. Like, those are disgusting murderer people.
And I'd be like, nice rapist shirt.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And I'm like, Charles Manson and Godzilla are not the same.
Right. There's no camp value to Charles Manson. No. He was a bad man.
Yes. And there was a guy selling. This was horrible. And he'd made a collage of like the Time magazine cover with Manson, and then like crime scene photos. And I
can't even look at those photos.
No, I went to.
I mean, I had to, because I had to tell the production designers exactly where the bodies were, but I didn't like
it. Yeah, that was your work, like this. And I went to this kid. I was like, "What the fuck's wrong with you?" And the crew's like, what? And I was like, why have you done? And he's like, ooh. And I got too Boston-y on him and was like, did anyone ever just beat the shit out of you before? He was like,
You're a dick.
Yeah. And he was like, well, I made a Columbine one. And people, I was like,
Oh my God.
Yeah. I was like, why do they, I wonder if people are so far removed from that stuff now and they've blended all this stuff together. So in their mind, like, The Night Stalker isn't any different from a Saw movie.
Right.
But it's like, that's a real thing.
Yeah, real people died in horrible ways. Yeah, it's what's funny, what's interesting about American Psycho, for example, is that I've met many a bro who says, wait, you wrote American Psycho? First of all, they don't believe me, which is very annoying to me because that would be a really weird lie because you can look it up. And second, they say, oh man, I love that movie. I am Patrick Bateman. I'm like,
You want to call the police now?
are you a loser or a serial killer?
Yeah.
You totally missed the point of this movie. And then I'm like, oh, but you know what the meta achievement is here when you're doing a send-up of someone and they like it.
Yes, you've gotten it correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't even know. Like, you're experiencing this movie on this level. Like, we're making fun of men.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like straight up making fun of men.
Yeah. I always wonder that, like, if there's even like the most simplistic, like, high school movie of like a jocks versus nerds movie. I'm like, there's people who watch that movie and are like, yeah, the jocks are the heroes of this movie.
Right.
Like, whatever. Because they're not identifying with the protagonist in that movie.
That reminds me that I haven't watched Revenge of the Nerds since it was a current movie, and I wonder how that stands up in a revisit.
So there's a real rapey scene.
Oh yeah,
that definitely doesn't stand up, but I find the rest of it does. Like, it's still very funny and weird. And I had Curtis Armstrong who plays Booger in Revenge of the Nerds on, and
also in one of my favorite movies of all time, Better Off Dead.
Yes, Better Off Dead. Yes, I've had both the female protagonists on.
Oh, wow.
And he has a very funny story about John Cusack losing his mind about Better Off Dead. He hates that movie. Yeah.
It's so good. I lived for that movie when I was a
It's
teenager.
one of my all-time
I can
favorites.
practically recite that movie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember when I found the soundtrack. I was so psyched because you couldn't just order it online.
Why does John Cusack hate that movie?
They were shooting One Crazy Summer on the Cape, and the movie hadn't come out yet, and they had a cast and crew screening, and he walked out halfway through, and he flipped out on Savage Steve Holland. He's like, you made me look ridiculous. I look so silly. And Curtis is like, he shot exactly the script. Like, there's nothing in the movie that's not in the script. Like, I don't know what movie you would have thought you were making. And just
And it's a silly movie.
Yeah. He I don't know what he thought he was making. He won't talk about it.
That is so weird.
It's really
like when I
bizarre.
think of John Cusack, I think of Better Off Dead.
Yeah, everybody
and loving
loves
him
that
in
movie.
it.
Yeah, everybody loves him in that. He's great in it, and I have no idea, for whatever reason, he really hates that movie.
Wow.
And everyone else who's in it are like all still in touch, and they like have fond memories. And
And he's like,
friends,
stay away from me, you weirdos.
Yeah, it's movies, I look ridiculous. Well, I think he made Stand By Me the same year and The Sure Thing the same year. And I get the only thing I could think of is if you compare those three movies.
Then
maybe.
Better Off Dead feels silly, but it's still great.
It's a great movie. So it's very strange. But you were still going to the movies, like once you kind of got out when you were 12, like you saw Better Off Dead when you were a teenager. You seen that in the theater, or was that a?
I think I saw that in the theater inside the family that I grew up in, movie wise. For some reason, they decided that we should all see Star Wars.
Okay.
And so we had a family outing to see Star Wars, a movie that I completely missed because I was too busy looking at people.
Yeah,
I'm just being overwhelmed by like, this is the real world, and this is I couldn't even focus on the movie.
Right.
That, and they were obsessed with Close Encounters because they had a spaceship thing.
Right.
So we got to see those, but those are the only two movies I ever saw in theaters. As a teenager, I went to high school in Highland Falls, which is outside of West Point, the military academy, in New York, and on base. They had a movie theater, and they would show movies. Like they would show the same movie every day for like a month. I watched E.T., which is one of my favorite movies. I think I almost literally watched it every weekday for a month.
Right.
I love that movie.
First movie I ever saw in the theater.
Really?
Yeah. It was a weird one to see in the theater too for the first time because you're like, all movies are like this.
Magic.
Yeah, exactly. Like a thing. And yeah, we were actually just staying up in the Hollywood Hills where the the trick-or-treating scenes were shot.
Oh,
So there.
I love that movie. I could watch that movie over and over.
Is that your like comfort go-to, I want to chill out movie? Or do you have one?
What? God, there's so many. I think I ran E.T. into the ground. I haven't revisited it in a couple decades.
You need to start playing the Atari game.
What? I'm trying to think because I just rewatched a movie. You know what movie I just rewatched? It's an airplane thing.
Okay.
Is the movie Game Night?
Oh yeah.
I was like, I'm watching this twice. I'm doing that.
I need to get
because I just find for some reason I just find that movie hilarious, which is weird. I have a weird like my favorite movie of all time is Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers movie.
It's a great movie. Was that on the list?
No.
Okay.
I discovered it at 13 and was like, my people have spoken.
Yeah.
I have the goofiest sense of humor. How I became to be the Gaylord of Darkness, I don't know. But I mean, literally, I was just at a meeting with a production company, and they were like, "Well, we have this incest project that we're looking for a writer for." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a logical next step for me. I've done serial killer, I've done cult leader, like incest for sure. That's
extreme flowers in that. Do you have anything like that? Yeah.
I'm like, that's interesting. I'm like,
what's the Duck Soup angle here?
I'm like, can someone please hire me to write a romantic comedy?
But I mean, all your stuff has a humorous edge to it. Like, there's definitely, unless you're watching it wrong, like American Psycho.
Yeah. I mean, Charlie says it's funny because there's a couple of things in it that I find really funny, but while watching it with an audience, I might be all alone.
Yes, but that's not a bad thing. It's like, have you ever seen Hell's a Poppin'?
No.
Oh, you would love Hell's a Poppin'.
What is it?
It's 1930s or 40s, and it's this comedy duo called Chick and Olsen, and they're like an old vaudeville troupe. But they had been doing this show on Broadway called Hell's a Poppin' for like 8 years. That was like just a really weird, meta, crazy comedy show that changed all the time. And they made a movie of it, and the movie is about them making a movie of Hell's a Poppin', and it's just crazy. Like, it's just it's so modern and weird and funny, and there's just insane things happen. And there's one of the first times they ever filmed African American people doing like really extreme swing dancing is in this movie for no reason.
Wow.
It's really cool. It's kind of has that anarchic Marx Brothers vibe, but feels weirdly modern. Like
I will watch it.
It's you can find it streaming and stuff, but I think you'd dig it. It's definitely ahead of its time in a weird way.
Wow.
Have you ever wanted to do just like a straight out comedy, or have you ever written something like it's just like a crazy comedy?
Totally. No crazy comedy. Not like broad comedy, not like Adam Sandler comedy. But yeah, no, I have all kinds of ideas and semi-written scripts that are just not dark at all.
Right.
Or at least not to me. I may have lost perspective.
When someone reads it and just starts crying.
What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
I remember one time I was somewhere traveling, and there was a screening of American Psycho, and I was chatting with a woman at a party beforehand, and she was like, "Oh no, I would never see that movie. I just, that's too scary for me." And I was like, it's not really a slasher movie. It's like a satire, and it's got humor. And I talked her into seeing the movie, and she sat next to me in the screening, and like immediately he like stomps on a dog and like, fucks with the homeless man. And I was like, I've completely lost perspective.
I forgot about that.
This is a really disturbing movie. And she was just looking at me like, what is your problem? I was like, sorry. I've seen it a lot of times.
Yes, I'm numb to this now. Do you find that when you watch stuff that's fairly extreme that you're numb to it in general, or stuff you've made?
The saddest thing about my life is that I'm actually a huge scaredy cat.
Yeah.
I had to be tricked into seeing Let the Right One In, because I would never have seen that movie. My friends literally did not tell me it was a scary movie. It's an amazing movie. I'm glad I saw it. I can't even watch trailers for scary movies. Like, I get really scared at things. I read American Psycho, the book, and I was like, fuck you, Brett Ellis. What is your problem? Which is actually literally what I said to him when I met him. I'm like, what is your problem, dude? We're friends now, even though he says shit on Twitter like American Psycho never should have been made into a movie. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it was taken out of context. I'm like, dude, it's Twitter.
Put it in. Yeah. It's all out of context. Yeah. It's all out or only context. That's all it is. Yeah.
It's funny. So I'm very scared of scary things. I haven't seen a lot of scary movies just because things like get seared into my brain and they won't go away. I'm still mad about an episode of the X-Files where the weird twins were keeping their mom under the bed.
Yeah.
Like that image is like forever freaks me out. It won't go away. That was like in the 90s I saw that. But I have so many, well, first of all, people, because of my work, assume that I'm like one of those cool kids who's like, like the weirder and scarier, the better. And I have lots of friends, you know, women in horror as a whole, you know, group that loves loves being them. And I can't hang with the big kids. It's terrible.
Do you think part of that is because you never saw that stuff as a kid, so you kind of didn't build up that immunity to it? Or?
That's an interesting theory that there was no desensitizing. I was just, and also the way that I grew up watching was you were quiet, you were focused, there was no you were all in.
Right.
And so I think I just take movies more personally, you know what I mean? They get in because that's sort of how I was raised, and, you know, this is a real thing and it's really important, you know.
It's mandatory.
Yeah.
You focus on this.
Yeah. So maybe it's that too, that there's not a distracted viewer in me anywhere.
Or you're sort of missing that catharsis people get out of it, which is weird to me. Like a lot of people get that roller coaster, like...
Yeah, I hate roller coasters too.
I hate haunted houses.
I'm genuinely scared. Why is this fun?
And it's people get like this weird... this will be somewhat crude, but I think it's like after you throw up, that like momentary sense of euphoria. They get like that kind of thing. Where I'm like, no, I don't think...
I know, but to me, it's like, you know, you hit yourself over the head with a hammer and then when you stop, it feels good.
Yeah.
Like, how about just don't do that in the first place?
Oh, but it's really fun. Which is pretty much, you described a lot of the horror movies lately. Did you watch television differently than you watch movies? Because you were used to watching movies as a kid when you approached television, when you were finally able to watch?
No, I think I'm remembering, looking back, I took it all very seriously. I remember one time I was home alone and I saw that the Amityville on the TV guide, that Amityville Horror was on, and I was like 14 and I was like, I'm cool enough to be able to watch this. I'm tough. Like, it's just a scary movie. It's just a movie. Seriously, the flies started gathering on the screen door, and I was like, I can't watch this. It's so scary.
Yes.
I had never seen that movie.
It's pretty horrifying, actually, to be honest. Like, I'm pretty desensitized to that stuff. And there's stuff in that movie that was just freaky.
And then one time I was at a slumber party around the same age, and the girls all wanted to watch scary movies, and so I was like trying to be cool. We watched My Bloody Valentine.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And I think probably Friday the 13th. And I was like glued to the TV, like I'm going to force myself to watch this. And I just remember it was My Bloody Valentine. And there's a scene where there's like a heart in a dryer or something.
Yep. Yeah.
And I was like so horrified. And I turned around, I was like, you guys, did you? And everyone was asleep but me.
That's horrifying.
And I was like frozen, like too afraid to even reach and turn the TV off. And everyone was like, I've been watching this alone.
I don't want to go too close to the TV.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was so freaked out.
Man, so it's
how do they fall asleep in the middle of that movie? It's so gruesome.
Sort of romantic, I guess.
Soothing.
Yes, like a nice, it's in mines, which is very dark and totally. But it would be shocking to people to say, I just made a movie about Charles Manson and I'm afraid of My Bloody Valentine.
Yes.
But I actually can't wait to see it because I'm actually the angle of the women is very interesting, and it is odd that hasn't really ever. I was thinking about like the TV, like Helter Skelter, the TV movie, had you seen any of those?
I did once I started working on this. I watched all of them, the billions. It seems like that man has been represented in film or TV and to lesser and greater degrees forever. The thing that was interesting to me about this story is that, the murders were so huge and the trial was so huge and all of it. And then just once they went to prison, no one ever spoke about them again.
Yeah.
It's like they died. And what's crazy about the story is that they were put on death row, but then the death penalty was lifted and they were stuck in a death row that was built just for them for 7 years. And that's what my story is about, is them just stuck there like in this infinity loop of talking about Charlie, which is why it's called Charlie Says.
Yeah.
So that weirdly the prison didn't realize what they were doing to them by not putting them in the general population was how they were just living with Charlie as if they had just spoken to him yesterday, and it's creepy.
They never got that decompression of
They finally did. That's what my movie's about. It's about each of them sort of coming to be unbrainwashed and sort of face what they did.
Right.
Without, with no safety net of it was for a greater good. It's like, no, that was senseless and you did that. At the behest of a man I've only known for a year.
Yeah, who's not even a good songwriter. I mean, I always wonder why that one was everyone's obsession, and it does kind of mark the end of the 60s, and I think it's because it's involved with Hollywood is the only thing I can think of. I mean, it is horrific, but it's not. There were horrific murders before that.
Yeah, the thing is, I think I've thought a lot about this. Like, why did it shake everyone in this way that we're still talking about it decades later? Women who kill rarely kill strangers.
True.
Women, like 95% of the women in prison who are in prison for murder killed people they knew.
Right.
Men killed strangers all the time. So it's that, and then the whiteness and the middle classness and the prettiness and the youth. Like, it was sort of like, yes, all kinds of sketchy people from different classes and races commit horrible crimes, and we expect that of them, but not the pretty middle-class white girls. Right. Like, now we're really freaked out because
something must have happened real bad for that to happen.
Like, those are our, our currency as a country is our pretty young white girls.
That something is rotten in suburbia. Aspect of
and it was also just, I think that an older generation was kind of panicking about, where the hippie thing was going, and but the hippies were just being hippies, having nonviolent protests and doing a lot of drugs, but nothing bad. And then I think an entire generation of people were like, "See what happens?
We knew this would happen."
Yeah, it was all going to end horribly.
Yeah.
Innocent people die because of hippies. It's like, no, that's not.
These are
different things.
Hippies?
Yeah,
it's kind of a different thing. Yeah. It's interesting too. Like that same year. I mean, you had like Night of the Living Dead, which is Romero has said is a movie about a new generation consuming the old one. And
is Night of the Living Dead from 1969?
68.
68.
Yeah.
I have seen that movie much later. Also terrifying.
Yeah. You do have that stuff in the air, though, and there's the final episode of Dragnet, which I don't know if you've ever seen.
No, I've actually never seen any of Dragnet.
Dragnet's, if you like seeing old LA on camera, Dragnet is wonderful.
Oh, and I do.
It was on for like 20 years.
How
so
cool.
You see just it changed so much. And the final episode, Jack Webb wrote and directed, and it's like a really angry tirade about hippies. And it's this
fascinating
druggie named Blue Boy who has an LSD overdose. And they're like, you have this violent hippie parties, and he makes this, he's so not of that time, and he makes a speech about it and everything, and it's so weird to see, it's on the Sunset Strip, and it's very strange, and especially if you watch like a old episode of Dragnet first, and then like watch the first and last episode, and it's almost too on the nose seeing this guy who's like the avatar of the square.
That's so interesting because he probably was just making himself look really old and out of touch, right?
And I think that might be 68 too, actually, when I'm thinking about it. But it is that thing, like, these kids are violent,
Right.
It's like, all right. And that was before the Manson killings. But yeah, now that you say that, it was very much in the air, like, these kids are nuts. They must be doing, criminal things, violent criminal things, which, again, there was a lot of hippies.
I have a couple of years ago, my mom gave me an anthology of New Yorker cartoons. It's this giant book, and it's such an interesting. You look at some of the cartoons, and you're like, what are they talking about? And it's a weird insight into like the anxieties of a time.
Right.
But some of it just does not. You're just like, I have no idea what that's
about. I don't get this. Yeah. Or like weird phrases that no one has used in 40 years.
Yeah.
Like a play on it. And you're like, no clue. I find that with like old Mad magazines and stuff. Sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what this means.
Right. Yeah, Mad Magazine's probably way inside itself.
Yeah. Some of those are like, this is a joke on what now?
Yeah.
It's very strange. But then there was, the sort of Manson-inspired horror films in the 70s. Like there was one called Snuff. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
And it was a movie called Slaughter that was just a pretty bad sort of Manson family ripoff that this woman, Roberta Finley, who's from Gloucester, Mass., and her husband made. And her husband later died on the top of the Pan Am building and a helicopter decapitated him.
Wow.
But
it's a big way to go.
Yeah, go big. But they the rumors of snuff movies were big in like 72. So they tacked on a fake ending to this movie of at the end of the movie they sort of pull back and like really murder somebody. And it was super controversial, and they got a ton of press out of it. And
were they trying to front that they really had killed someone?
Yes, and they hired women to protest out in front of the theaters.
Ooh, hiring protesters,
yes,
good marketing scheme.
And that kind of stuff. And it's just a really bad Manson-y movie, but it became notorious for years as a real snuff movie, even though I think at the time they were like, no, that's garbage. But it's still kind of, moved on. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that came after the Manson family, stuff like that, sort of got absorbed by the mythology of it as well.
It's weirdly in one of the many books I read. That entire shelf is all the books I read for this movie. He speculates, Ed Sanders, his book is called The Family. He speculates that they were shooting snuff movies.
Really?
Yeah. And then at the end he's like, well, it's just a rumor, but he talks about it for like 5 pages.
Yeah.
Which is, it's weird because it's connected to what you're saying. That, like what's the worst thing that we can think of to tell that bad people are doing,
have you ever read the Mies Report? Reagan had this guy, Charles Mies, Ed Mies, do a study on pornography for like 5 years. And one of the things he wanted them to find, like the number one thing, was snuff movies. Because what they were trying to prove was like a connection between pornography and violence.
Right, which is sort of what happened to Betty Page as well.
Right. So Mies in the section on snuff movies, it's interestingly written because he basically is writing, look, I really wanted these to be real. Like, we really, really, really tried. They're not real.
Has no one ever made a movie about that guy's year?
I would love to.
I mean, like, we just because he had to watch tons of porn.
Yeah.
And make a official report about it, but basically the man just watched tons of porn and violent porn, and
with a conclusion already like trying to be like, okay, so how is this going to make me violent? Like a really weird way to watch it.
Do I feel violent?
Yeah.
Would that make me feel like killing women?
And he's like some uptight, focus on the family, like church guy.
Yeah, he was like super conservative dude, right?
So they're like,
have you read that?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, what a fascinating thing.
You can get. I think it's online now too, but it's in it's a FOIA document, and it only came out about 10 years ago. But it's the thing that struck me the most was how like apologetic it is, because it's clearly written like for Reagan's consumption.
Right.
But they were like, man, I swear we really, really tried.
And then nobody's killing anybody.
Not there. It's just not there. And that was the thing. That was like the boogeyman of that world, was those kind of movies. I don't even know who thought of that. Like, it's such a weird idea.
Yeah, it really is.
Just really killing people, and they sell them.
Right.
Strange. Is there anything you watch now?
I watched Killing Eve, which was one of those, how sometimes people are like, have you seen Killing Eve? Have you seen, and it gets overhyped, and then you're just annoyed, and then you're just like, for no particular reason, have a tantrum and don't watch it.
Oh, everything. Yeah. I still have Mad Men and Breaking Bad sitting in a pile.
Like, I refuse to be enthralled. So I watched Killing Eve, and I was sort of like, everyone in my life thinks I'm just gay and a serial killer, and that's all there is to me. I'm like, those are just some things.
Do they do a thing where it's like, this show, you're
gonna love it, yeah, which is annoying to me. But I did actually enjoy it, and because I found the psychopath killer hilarious.
Right.
There's just a point where she's like, "You should not tell a psychopath that she's a psychopath. It hurts her feelings."
Good advice. Really, just good advice generally. Yeah.
I thought that was hilarious. That character is really hilarious to me. So yeah, I watched that. What am I watching these days? I get sucked into, like, this is related to my duck soup love in a way. I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, it's kind of a similar.
I find it like hilarious and charming, and like the perfect thing to just watch an episode before you go to bed, and puts me in like a happy mood. Like, I just like all those characters, and I want to be friends with them. So but that's super dorky. Like,
when low stakes though too.
I said that I teach at UCLA this semester, and I said that in front of my class, and I could just see people like, wow, really? Like, disappointed in me as a consumer.
Yeah.
You're not as cool as we thought you were.
But I mean, I think like everyone I know who writes horror or horrific stuff also tends to really like comedy, because structurally they're the same.
Yeah.
And just I don't know if you've ever read Stephen King's Dance Macabre. It's his when he was teaching at University of Maine about horror. He took his class notes and wrote a book, basically, and it's nonfiction. And it's just about it. There's some great autobiographical stuff, but it's just about the sort of function and structure of horror.
I like 100% should read that book.
It's really good.
Also because I read his book on writing, and it was recommended to me, and I was like, Stephen King, like I'm not like a huge fan of his work. And then I read that, I was like, this book is amazing, inspiring and genius and beautifully written. And I was like, who am I to say? I know. I give props to Stephen King, like that. He's a good writer.
If you like that, you'll love Dance Macabre too, because he. And actually, when comics ask me for advice on like writing comedy, I go buy Dance Macabre. It's like $1 used, like it's, and they're like, but every time I'm like, oh yeah, I totally get it now, because sometimes the thing that I always think it illustrates well is like the shock humor versus like an actual scare, because like if you're doing like an offensive joke, the reaction you get is like they're throwing the cat at someone, like they jump, but then they're kind of mad, they don't trust you anymore,
right?
And it's the same kind of thing. So he illustrates that really well, and for whatever reason, it's easier to apply it to comedy when they see it written in a horror context.
Interesting, very interesting.
So it's not totally odd that you like Brooklyn 99.
Well, but also like I find the movie Misery weirdly funny.
Totally, yeah.
You kind of made me feel all oogie.
Yeah,
Which is as weird as it is. I do find humor in. I mean, I suppose that was he was trying to be funny.
Is it Rob Reiner? I think it's Rob Reiner that made Misery, right?
That wrote it?
That made it. I think.
That directed it.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot.
Rob Reiner. But
it's William Goldman who wrote it.
Yes, yeah. But that has the humor.
Yeah.
It is Rob Reiner because it's him partnering with William Goldman after Princess Bride.
Right.
Which is weird that's the follow-up to Misery. Yeah, but it's that oh gosh darn it kind of.
While I'm torturing you and kidnapping you, and I'm just gonna be all like sweet and girly. Ugh.
Good God. Is there? You've worked in huge movies and you've been working in this industry for a while now. Is there anyone that you've met that you were intimidated by because you watched them when you were growing up, or were you kind of immune to that because you missed sort of the first 12 years of that? Or the people you watched weren't alive?
There's that.
Yeah, which was helpful.
I'm trying to think, so have I met anyone I was starry-eyed for? No, I did a party with Leo DiCaprio in the 90s because I did a movie with his one of his best friends, Ethan Suplee, and I ended up with their vacation pictures. They had all just come back from vacation. It was like, their whole posse, like Tobey Maguire and all those guys, and Leo was like, hey, does anyone have a bag? Can you hold these for me? Because, they were printed out.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well. And then he just forgot to ask from the back. And I just remember, like, getting home and being like, I have a picture of Leo DiCaprio looking hungover, eating a bowl of cereal in, like, some rented hotel. And I was like, I could sell this to teen people because Titanic had just come out for a lot of money. I was like, bad karma. Yeah. Let me just invite some friends over to look at the pictures, and then I'll give them back.
Yes. That is like the ultimate morality test.
Yes.
For Twilight Zone.
Yes.
You like that.
He. Anyway, it was exciting. It was interesting to me to meet him and Tobey Maguire at that moment in time because they were so famous. It was just interesting to be in public with people who are that level of famous because the energy, like just like everyone in the room is aware that they're there, and I'm sitting next to them.
Everyone looks at them like you looked at everyone in the theater at Star Wars.
Yes, like what are they gonna? And so you just feel like everyone's looking at you, and it's this crazy energy that I wouldn't want.
No, that is like a Faustian curse.
Yeah,
that people have. And aside from the writing, like what made you want to get in front of the camera too? Were they always hand in hand?
Well, with Go Fish, which was my first film,
necessity.
we knew like, okay, no one's getting paid. This is going to take us a long time. It took us 2 years. We were like shooting on weekends for 2 years. I know that I will be committed.
Right. I'm not going to quit on me.
Yeah. So I'll play this character. I'll just write a character that it's easy for me to play because I'm not a trained actor. I've never taken an acting class in my life. And so then after Go Fish came out, people were more interested in me as an actor than they were as a writer. Because I think a lot of people saw that film, Go Fish, as they thought it was like not scripted or like a little bit documentary. I mean, it was totally scripted. It's, we were not playing ourselves at all. I was trying to be Butch, which is not me in real life. So I got a lot of attention as an actress, and I did that for a bit before I met Mary and partnered up with her and got taken seriously as a writer. It's just what was there, and I really love being in front of the camera, and I love being on a set.
Right.
With a purpose, and I love the camaraderie, and I love the problem solving, and I just love the whole culture of it, and I love, inevitably there will be a crisis, and then you learn so much about a person when you see them in a crisis on a movie set, because I'm always like, we're not curing cancer, everybody take a deep breath.
No one's gonna die.
We can figure this out. So I love that, and then I get really sick of that, and I'm happy that I'm a writer, and I get to be alone for a while until I get lonely again. The one thing I can't stand about acting, and I always have to make this statement on the first day, and I can see in people's eyes that they think I'm going to be a nightmare, and I'm not. I'm very easy to work with, is I just hate how much people touch you. Like, you have to get mic'd, and then,
Right.
like the hair, an hour and a half or 2 hours in hair and makeup, and then people like, sort of own you, so people, like a wardrobe person will come up and just tweak
Right,
you.
without asking.
Yes. So I always have to say, if you need to touch me, I'm going to need you to see me first.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to see you first. I need you to stand in front of me, and I need you to tell me / ask me if you can touch me.
Yeah.
They're like, oh God, high maintenance diva. And I'm like, no,
Wait, I'm
other
a
than that, I'm
person.
super chill.
Yeah.
I just get really, I always say, like, if you come up behind me and touch my shoulder, you are likely to get an elbow in the chest.
Yeah.
That's just my response
Seems
to
fair.
that.
Yeah.
Yes. I just, don't do that. So anyway, but I wish I could do more acting, actually. And it was really fun. It was really interesting to be in American Psycho after having written it with Mary. I mean, once we sort of realized that character she is from the book was going to end up in the script, I was like, you have to let me play this character.
Yeah, so you knew it.
I'm a Sarah Lawrence girl. She's a Sarah Lawrence girl.
Right.
I am not her, but I went to school with her. And that, and then it was just this really interesting dynamic of having, we had already written the Betty Page script, and we wrote this. Then all of a sudden, being actor and director instead of co-writer was stressful.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
And it's it's a stressful scene. There's nudity, there's violence, there's comedy that I had to roll off a couch. Like it was a tough day at the office, just in terms of actual actor work.
But writing something and playing that is probably easier than playing something someone else wrote. But playing something you're directing probably seems harder.
Well, for me, like the hardest part about being an American Psycho was I didn't want to disappoint Mary.
Right.
And so I was I did the first take, and she literally came up from behind the monitor, came over and sat next to me on the couch and said, "Are you okay?" Which is the worst thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I suck so much that she thinks I'm sick.
Yeah. Do you need to go somewhere? Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I'm just kind of nervous. And she was like, just don't think about it. Just throw it away. Just be a crappy version of yourself. And it helped. And Christian was great to work with. I feel bad that he has such a reputation for being a monster diva, because he's really not. He's so, you learn a lot about someone when they kill you in a sex scene.
I imagine,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like in terms of like what kind of person they are, and he was 100% lovely.
That should be stitched on a pillow.
Yes. He's a great guy. And have you seen him as Dick Cheney?
Yeah.
OMG.
Yeah. He just seems very serious about what he's doing.
He takes that shit very seriously. He never spoke in an American accent. He never spoke in his native British accent the whole time we were shooting. He didn't socialize. He was like renting videotapes. Like we'd sit at a table read, and there would be like a VHS of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like we were like, how far is he taking this?
This isn't a documentary.
Yeah,
Right?
what does he do when we're all hanging out at night?
We never see him, and it's a little strange.
He's very intense. It's amazing. And then he went to Batman and was all ripped, and then he went to The Machinist and was like, weighed like 30 pounds less than I do, and
then did Equilibrium.
Yeah,
really good.
and then and now he's Dick Cheney. What? I saw a picture of it, and I just couldn't even wrap my head around it. I'm like, how did you Dick Cheney-fize your face?
Yes.
Like it's you 100% look like him. I can barely see Christian Bale in there. It's amazing.
Like him, which is so weird.
Oh, I haven't heard. Oh, that's amazing.
It's the thing about Dick Cheney that always fascinated me is for a time he literally did not have a heart. He was between heart transplants, and he had an artificial heart, but it didn't beat. it was like a thing on his hip that just like constantly circulated his blood. So he
Whoa.
was literally heartless for like 6 months.
Wow.
Which I'm like, that's way too perfect.
That's a little. If it was in a movie, it'd be like, we got it. It's a little heavy-handed, the metaphor.
You cut that stuff. Someone asked him after, I forget who told me this, but someone asked him after he got his heart transplant, like, oh, did you ever think about the person whose heart that was? And he goes, no. It's just like,
That is
no. I didn't think about it.
That is so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, of course you're like, whose heart is this?
Right.
They make
Thank
movies
you so
about that
much.
stuff. Yeah. Where's your
No.
family? Like, I haven't heart. You want to feel your dead
Yeah.
family member's heartbeat, like all that stuff. You know, they make movies about that stuff.
Playing that guy.
He's like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Nope, not even for a second.
What an asshole.
Only this. Yeah, I'm like, Jesus. I couldn't imagine having to find, because obviously as an actor you have to find something likable about that person to play.
Right.
Because you can't play someone you hate.
Right.
And so like,
What did he
man,
find?
how
It'd be
do you
interesting to
find-
hear him talk about it.
Yeah, because that's extreme.
He was,
Literally heartless
you know
person.
that, you know the actor Billy Crudup.
Yeah.
You know he was who we initially cast as Patrick Bateman in American Psycho.
Oh, I didn't-
and I had forgotten about that till recently. And then he, about a month into him saying yes, he called Mary and said, I can't find this character. I don't think I'm the right guy for the job. And I always thought it was so impressive to be an actor that so knows that they can't find it. And Christian was like, I get it. I get this guy. We were like, okay, that's a little disturbing, but we need that.
We're afraid to tell you now.
Yes.
Yeah, when you're writing characters like that, even is it difficult to write them in a way that humanizes them? Or, you know, even with this Manson thing, you're writing the women probably, you know, you're not writing them as monsters.
There's a scene in Charlie Says where you feel bad for Charlie. I mean, I think that, you know, complicity is such an important part of storytelling, is that you make the audience complicit. Mm-hmm. I always reference the movie Happiness, you know, the Todd Solondz film.
Yeah.
So there's a moment in that movie where the pedophile, who was literally drugging and raping a child, when the cops are coming to the door and you're like, oh no, don't go to the door, they're gonna get, and you're like, how did this guy just get me to sympathize with a pedophile?
'cause you're
I'm like,
fuck this
well
guy.
done, well played, Sir Solondz.
Yeah.
So, but I always find that's that trickiness. It's the same thing with American Psycho. Like, I love being in an audience with that movie and having people laugh, and then like the laughter just sort of like melts away, and then you can feel this energy in the room. Like, what am I laughing at? And I'm like, I got you.
But do you feel like that's like a dangerous power too? Because you could do that without the got you. You know, you just it's if you have the ability to humanize a monster, you can kind of just plateau it.
Right.
You know?
I mean, I guess the thing is that maybe I'm just a lefty liberal softy, but I do feel like even the monsters of humans have a humanity to them. And it's like what you were saying for actors too. It's like for Christian and Dick Cheney, it's like you got to find something. Like, that guy was something okay once. Or, you know, in the case of Patrick Bateman, like, he really does just want to fit in.
Yeah, maybe he's a really good investment banker. Like, that's the Hitchcock thing. People like any character is good at their job, no matter what.
Oh,
else.
really?
Like,
Oh, that's a good wisdom.
Yeah. So it's like, as long as they're good at their job, people are like, okay.
I think that's true in life.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I love about being on movie sets, actually, is when you watch people be really good at what they're doing, it's just sexy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, people are sexy that you wouldn't, if you just saw them walking down the street, you wouldn't think they're sexy, but then they do their job really well and really fast and with, you know, confidence, and you're like, that's hot.
They can do a thing. I can't do that.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it is. It truly is. Even if there's other things, and you know, the other thing is that the best villains don't see themselves as the villain; they see themselves as the hero of the thing.
Right.
So that's the other thing. But I always find that difficult if you're coming up with a story to sort of find that in some people.
Yeah.
It's even harder when they're real life people.
Yeah.
You don't have necessarily the benefit of being able to change history necessarily to fit.
I mean, in Charlie's case, his desire to be a rock star was somewhat pathetic, and I just sort of shine a light on that.
Yeah.
That, like, honestly, if he had gotten a record deal, those people would still be alive.
Or if he was like 2 inches taller.
Yeah. Which is crazy because, you know, Matt Smith, who plays him in my movie, is a tall guy. He's at least 6 feet. And I was like, Mary, Matt Smith, he's really tall. She's like, I am not going to cast someone just for their height. No Emil Hirsch.
Yeah.
Just because he actually is 5'2".
Well, it's weird to find tall actors anyway. Like I did a panel with David Tennant, and I was like, oh, he's taller than me. It struck me as weird because I'm used to being, the actors being teeny tiny people.
I know. Tom Cruise is like my height.
Yeah, he's very small.
I'm 5'2". I mean, I think he's literally 5'2".
Yeah.
That's like really small for a man. That's really small for a person.
They're small, yeah. Like Lance Hendrickson.
No, who's that?
He was on. Remember the show Millennium? He was the Frank Black in Millennium. And he's always a bad guy. He was actually cast as the Terminator before Schwarzenegger.
Oh wow!
But he always plays like a real heavy. And I saw him in person for the first time recently, and he's really small. And it only struck me as strange in that I've seen him in movies with people. He was in a really wonderful, awful movie called Stone Cold with former Seattle Seahawks quarterback Brian Bosworth.
Oh, wow.
Who plays an undercover cop in a biker gang, and the biker gang are trying to kill the entire Supreme Court.
That sounds amazing, actually.
It's one of the most fun, dumb movies to watch. Like, up to and including the pre-credits sequence is a fight scene in a supermarket that includes the final line, clean up on aisle 4, and like turn in your gun badge. Like, it's not a parody, but it's perfect. But that guy was a football player. He's like 6'6", and there are scenes with him and Lance Hendrickson eye to eye, and it hit me that like
they're standing on an apple box.
Boxes.
Yeah.
So it just was like, this is hilarious now that this guy's standing on a ladder.
Yeah, I've had many a apple box path made for me because I had to walk through a scene, and I was smaller, especially when it's a dude. They just tend to be bigger than me.
Yeah.
Which is it's a learned skill.
Is it hard to watch things and get lost in them now when you watch that, knowing that that's kind of just under the frame? Like,
I remember after making Go Fish, I remember watching the first movie after we had finally finished the process, and I was like, oh no, I just ruined movies for myself. Now I see a movie and I'm like, how did they do that? That was ADR. That's a continuity error. That actor is fucking freezing right now, but she has to pretend she's not.
She's got ice cube in her mouth.
Yeah.
She gets your breath. Yeah.
And so, I ruined movies in a way that I have to like give myself a little speech and try to get out of that movie filmmaker brain to just get lost in a movie. But I also that now I'm like, oh, it's a sign of a movie that is not doing what it needs to do if I'm noticing continuity errors.
If you're looking for other things.
If I'm not lost in it. But see this poster right here, that's me.
Yes. This is the Preaching to the Perverted movie poster for this.
Yeah, from France.
Yep.
I love that poster. The director told me that someone after a screening came up to him and said, "Where did you find such a giant woman?"
Everybody, she's not giant. You look huge in that picture, though. Like,
that is not a life-size poster because she is bigger than me.
Yeah, it's like a Subway
bigger than
poster.
life. Yeah.
Actually, we saw Grace Jones yesterday, and that outfit's for Grace Jones.
No shit.
Yeah, she.
That's amazing.
There's the documentary about her that just came out, and it's amazing. Highly recommend it. But she came out and spoke. And that's a very Grace Jonesy outfit.
That was a very painful outfit.
That looks very uncomfortable.
I definitely had days on that set where I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, how did I get here? It was just the hair and makeup and clothes were almost every scene I'm in pain.
Yeah.
Because I had corsets and like I had hours, so I could have like giant cones on my head. Have you ever seen the movie?
Yes. Yeah.
It's a camp classic.
Yeah, it really is. Yes.
It was one of the most fun times I've ever had in my life. Like, I loved making the movie, but
You're glad it's over.
it was painful. It was painful, and I just couldn't eat because I knew I was going to be squeezed into a corset every day.
Yeah.
And so I just got really thin, and I came home and everyone was like, what happened to you? Because they had dyed my hair black, which my hair was red before, and I was super skinny, and I just kept getting mistaken for Parker Posey, which was weird.
That's how you do it.
You just get really skinny.
It's a new diet sensation. You just get put in this outfit every day for a month, and then you come back a different person.
And you're Parker Posey.
Do you watch the movies that you're in as an actor? Can you watch them and enjoy them, or lose yourself?
I now know myself. I need to watch it first and just get all the self-hate and doubt over with, and then go back and grow the fuck up and watch it as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me.
Yeah.
I often take a long time to face it because because I never see myself in something and I'm not self-critical. And I think that's true of most actors, like where I'm like, I could have done that better. I could look better there. It was great once I actually started directing. I've written and directed several short films and I'm in a couple of them. And it was a great moment in the editing room where I was like, oh, now I understand why sometimes they choose shots that are not the most flattering of me because they need it for other reasons.
It works better for everything else.
And as I felt more forgiving of all the directors that I had up to that point hated.
Just make everyone direct and edit for a day.
So I'm like, it doesn't matter that my hair is frizzy in that shot. It just doesn't matter because the other person in the scene is amazing.
Is there anything that like you mentioned the Brady Bunch, but is there anything else that you've tried to revisit as an adult or visit for the first time as an adult that you missed out on that you either absolutely loved or is incredibly baffling? Like the Brady Bunch is probably in that category, I think.
Yeah, the Brady Bunch I found kind of boring and repetitive.
Yeah. Oh, the Vincent Price episode's pretty great.
I puzzled over shows like My Three Sons, and I mean those are not from the 70s, but people were watching them still.
Yeah.
I puzzled like I Love Lucy. I was like, this is so dumb.
Yeah.
So like I think that my generation were watching those in reruns anyway, and it was sort of part of the fabric of growing up.
Bewitched and Andrew Bacchini and Monsters and Adam.
Oh, the Monsters in particular, I was like, what?
Yeah.
This is so dumb.
It always made me mad because it looks great.
Yeah.
As a kid who likes monsters and stuff, you're like, this is going to be awesome. And you're like, oh, it's just a regular sitcom.
Super, goofy.
Yeah, it's just regular things. There's nothing that interesting about it.
Yeah, so all of those things were perplexing to me, why they were famous. But, what did happen in TV when I was a teenager, like when I was 15, I guess, was MTV.
Yeah.
I was really excited about MTV.
You had cable. You were able to...
Yeah, I lived with my grandmother for a while, and she had cable, and I would just run home from school. Because I had a crush on Martha Quinn.
Yeah.
And with her one earring and her cool haircut. And I just like on the 5 songs they played on MTV, but when it first came out, and the moon landing thing and all of it, I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. Yeah. I was like, Madonna's white? What?
I had no idea. Pat Benatar.
Yeah, that doing the video that she dance she does and all her cool girl gang behind her.
It's like post-apocalyptic West Side Story.
Yes, amazing.
Yeah. But that, I mean, the way you grew up is not influencing that at all, because everyone I know of the generation that first time TV had the same reaction.
Like it was the coolest thing ever.
No one saw anything like it, and nothing was being made kind of by the people who it was for. It was like old guys making youth culture stuff before
right
that. And they were, I think part of it was, to the Go Fish sort of mentality. They were like, we just have to do it this way because these are the people we have,
right?
And we don't really know anything else to do, and so we're kind of making it up as we go along, and it just happens to be great.
Yeah.
Which then later they tried to reverse engineer, and that's when it kind of got boring.
Right.
but and also we got these weird experimental films that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. Yeah,
they were so exciting, those videos. They were really, and when new ones were about to come out, I mean, it was a whole exciting world, and it did feel very modern, knowing it and liking it.
Yeah.
As a teenager, I felt like, MTV's cool, like it's for us.
Which I can't think of anything before that was, it was just, now it's very, they can micro-target stuff specifically for you. Right. We made this show for one person.
Right. There's so much out there.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Are
you a big reader? Like, you're clearly reading a lot of stuff to research for a movie, but are you like a pleasure reader?
There's kind of no such thing for me because there's always something to read for work.
Right.
Every once in a while I sneak away. I snuck away and read, I'm looking at it right now, Joan Didion's Year of Magical Thinking, because I just felt like a fool because I hadn't read it. But mostly... The sad truth is, mostly when I read, I'm reading scripts.
Right.
Because I teach, because I act, because I read them for jobs, potentially to rewrite them, because I read them to study them if I know the film. And I'm like, how did I get here? How did I get to a place where I don't read books? I read things that aren't the thing. They're a description of a thing that
Right.
doesn't exist.
Right.
Like, this is existential. And I
like
teach
this
people
thing.
how to do that.
Yes. Here's how you write nothing.
Here's how you write a description of a thing that doesn't exist. Ready? Go. Make it interesting. Not too interesting because it's not a book.
Right. Show don't tell, but tell me enough that you show me.
And make it fun. Make it not a torturous thing to read. I'm reading another script. I hate reading scripts.
Oh, I don't
hate
know how
it.
you could do it. I took
It's like literally what I do all day.
Oh man, I don't envy you because I took it wasn't really a screenwriting class, it was like a group at Harvard. They had like a night school. And the guy who taught the class wrote one movie, and it was a horror movie based on H.P. Lovecraft's story, but it was The Unnameable 2. And he talked about The Unnameable 2 all the time like he had written Citizen Kane.
Wow.
It was always like, when I did The Unnameable 2. But the concept of the class was like you would, everyone wrote a script, and then one week we'd all read the person's script, and the next week we'd talk about the person's script. And this guy wrote, it was the worst script I've ever read. It was like a total ripoff of the Patty Hearst thing, but there was like mutant fish in it. And and she fell in love with one of her captors. It was really bad. And no one wanted to say it. It's like, come on, somebody, get the thing going.
Like everyone was just like blown away by how horrible it was.
So I was like, I'm 19, whatever. I'm like, I thought it was really bad. And then everyone was like, yes. And they just piled on this guy. And there was an old guy there he worked in like exploitation movies in the 70s. And he goes, no one wants a big salmon picture. No one. You couldn't sell a big salmon picture. And he's just going on and on. And
That's hilarious.
It was great. And this guy was so upset. And I remember going like, in this scene, this guy has her tied up and he's like licking her and she's screaming. And then they're like getting married. Like literally like in the next scene.
You didn't earn it.
Yeah. And so this guy was so upset. And 6 months later, I was going in for an internship interview at this production company, and they're walking me around the building, and they're like, we have a chef and we have an arcade, like, all the kind of, and I go into the office, and the guy I'm interviewing with is the guy that wrote that script.
Oh, wow.
And I sit down and I go, oh, there's no way I'm getting this in. And he goes, nope.
He's like, I'm still mad.
And he's like, and we're going to sit here for 20 minutes so they think I interviewed you.
Oh my God.
And I guess I could have just left, but I was like, for some reason I feel like I couldn't. So we just sat there.
That is a weird scene.
Yeah, it was very strange.
But I always want to say to people, brutal honesty. You don't know how full of shit your friends are until you sit in the back row at a test screening of your movie and hear what people say when they don't know the filmmakers are in the room.
Yeah.
That's honesty. We did that with Betty Page. And we sat, and me and Mary, the director, sat in the back and listened to someone run a test screening. A woman literally said, I feel like they took everything that's interesting about Betty Page's life and left it out.
God. Oh, God.
We were like,
brutal.
ouch. I'm like, but it kind of makes me realize how not honest my friends are being about stuff. And so for you to just say, like, I think it's really bad, like, that's a gift.
Yeah, like,
brutal
you're
honesty
right.
is I mean, I guess.
I could have done it in a more delicate way.
Well, what was that guy's job?
He was like a production coordinator for this. Like, they make commercials, So this was, I think he was like, this is the real me. I'm gonna get out with this, And it was like, no, you could have done this better.
My aunt, when she lived here years ago, said that she one day, as a lark, went around pretending to be like a man on the street thing, and just saying to people, so how's your screenplay coming? And she said, everyone had an answer.
It was never, what screenplay?
Yeah.
Well, what's a screenplay?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, whenever we're here, when we eavesdrop on people, which we do all the time, it's everyone talking about, like, well, finished another screenplay.
Third act problems.
It's like, there's not that many movies, man. Like, you can't all be doing
It's embarrassing. Like when you walk into the average cafe in LA and you look at people's laptops, you can just see the shape of a script. And I'm like, whenever I find myself, and it's not often, writing a script in a cafe, I always want to be like, no, but for real, I do this for a living.
I'm an actual person.
This is not the first one. I've had movies made.
This is a real movie. I have
Yeah.
a poster in my house with me and the thing. Yeah, it is very weird like that, because and then you'll get people who will talk to you and give you advice when they've never done it. Like, I get that with comedy a lot. Like, I was working on a thing for, it was like for a festival. It was like a filmed thing. I was working on a set, and this kid after my set was like, yeah, it was pretty good. I've been doing it. And I'm like 8 years. And he's like, yeah, you just keep working on it. Like, I'm like, thank you.
I showed a short that I wrote and directed to a friend of mine, my friend Rose, Trochet, who directed Go Fish, and she watched the movie, and then she just turned to me and she goes, "Keep making work, GT. Keep making work." I was like, "Shut the fuck up. You're so pretentious." Thanks, I will.
Yeah. Don't stop believing.
Yes. You got it, kid. I can talk shit about her because she's my friend.
There you go. Yeah, that's why we have friends. Yes. Well, I won't take your whole afternoon. Thank you so much for talking to me. This
Absolutely.
It's you were correct. This is a story I've not heard from anyone about their relationship with TV prior.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's also weird that, given all of that I ended up working in film and TV, because you might think that I was either too precious or too confused to make it my work. But it's funnily parallel with my relationship to scary stuff, which is that I'm scared, and yet it's what I do. It's what I'm known for.
Right.
I'm known for being edgy. I'm edgy.
But it's not like intentional in a way.
It's just sort of what happened.
Yeah, it's how other people react to the things you do.
Wait for my incest movie.
Yes, everyone, edge your seat for the incest movie. Can't wait. It's what it's going to be called.
The incest movie.
Yeah, it's perfect. It couldn't be anything else. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's Guinevere. How amazing is she? She's fantastic. Absolutely see her new Charlie Manson movie, which I have not yet seen, but I am very excited to check it out, given our discussion about it. All of the things she's done are great, so you really can't go wrong there. Another way you can't go wrong is to be here next week when we have a brand new episode. If you've listened to this on iTunes or Google Play or anything like that, make sure you subscribe. And if you have a couple of seconds, please rate and review the show. It helps with the algorithms and lets people know about the show. I am always eager to get new listeners because I think a lot of people would like this show. They just don't know about it. But you know about it, and that's all that counts. So please be here next week. I know that sounds pleading, but I really want to see you next week. We need to talk next week. So anyway, we'll see you again next time for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor.
I had a crush on Alan Alda. I had a crush on Kermit, which basically is like, I'm gay.